So Joey, this really came out well. The silver vein really covered it well.
Yeah, the silver vein did a good job at covering all the rust and the other little imperfections that were in it. It was sort of a long process, but I think it did a pretty good job.
So this looks a lot more durable than it did last time. It seems it's going to be able to really withstand being outdoors.
It will. The powders themselves are designed to be outside. They're designed for UV protection and chemical resistance, so the water is not going to have any effect on the powder itself. The thickness actually helped reinforce some of the metal because some of this is very, very thin, and it just added some thickness to it, added some weight to the product. So it should hold up very well.
And last a while.
It should last a long time. It's going to be probably the best looking sink that's on a deck anywhere. So if it's going to sit outside, it should hold up very good. Now, if you'll remember when we first got this, there was a lot of rust inside these drawers and the corners, and we were able to go in and sand the rust off, which we had to get the rust off. If we'd have just coated over the top of it, the rust would have still come through later. So we had to get all that rust down. But the places that we sanded off, you can tell, the good thing about using a textured powder is it covers all the imperfections. If we'd used a high gloss white or a high gloss black without some sort of a metal filler, we would have still been able to see all those little imperfections and where we sanded. But the texture did its job. It did a very good job of hiding all the places that we sanded. It makes it look very smooth and uniform throughout.
It does. Now when this powder goes on, it goes on like any other powder would, just smooth. But when does it separate? How does that process happen in the oven? Right?
Okay, yeah, well what actually happens, you can't tell the difference between when you're spraying a texture versus a high gloss or a flat or any other color. They're basically going to spray the same way. What the texture really is, a general way to put it, they're two powders that don't like each other. One will flow they flow at different rates. So one powder will start to flow and the other one will flow later and actually set on top of it and start to separate, which is what gives it the texture to look. Okay, now another one of the challenges that we had with this, if you'll remember, we had all the writing that was here as marker. We actually had to take a solvent to get that off. If we hadn't, that would have all bled through the powder. Where some people will make a mistake is they try to grind that off or sand it off, but what they don't understand is that the marker actually gets down into the metal because the metal is very porous. And then when you powder over it and the heat hits it, it would actually have shown back through. So we took a solvent, got all of that off, and that allowed us to powder over it, and you can no longer see where all the magic marker writing was. Another thing were the welds. If you remember when we first got this, the welds were pretty rough. We were able to sand some of those down, smooth it off a little bit, and then the powder itself, just because of the thickness of it, somewhat filled, it gives it a lot more uniform of a look and a lot more rounded of a look across the front than what it had before. Now probably the most major challenge that we had with this was it actually had Bondo on this side. If you remember when we first got it, you could see the Bondo. And we covered it. There are some spots where you can see where the Bondo tried to bubble a little bit because Bondo itself is not designed to withstand heat. It's not meant to powder coat over. It's meant for more of a liquid application. So we had a few issues. We had to be very careful when we blasted it because the Bondo tends to be soft. So we didn't just eat it up with the blaster. And then when we coated it, we had to be very careful with it so it didn't bubble out on us. But compared to what it did look like, and you can obviously see there's still some holes where it had rusted through. If this were something that we were looking for more of a Class A type finish on, that you were going to put in your home or it was going to be a very visible showpiece, we would have literally gone back and taken this all out and gotten a Bondo or a metal filler that is designed to powder coat over the top of it, and we could have gone in and covered all these holes. Yeah, I didn't want to do it on this because we wanted to make a point to show you what can happen if you go over Bondo. So we didn't go through that step on this one, and because of where it's going to be used at, it wasn't really that important. And at some point we'll try to cover that on one of the episodes, that we'll actually go in and take something and we'll show how to use the metal filler. So we didn't do it on this one, but you can see that it still did a pretty good job of covering it up. Now the last thing I want to point out is the actual top itself. If you've gone back and seen any of the footage where we were prepping this before we coated it, you're going to notice that when we coated this, it actually still was porcelain. The porcelain, what we had to do is we had to sand it and smooth it down. Now one of the unique things about the porcelain that we have to remember that's different is the raw metal. When we sandblasted all the metal and we got all the paint off of it, we went back down to raw metal, we actually put a phosphate on it. Put a phosphate on it as a rust inhibitor, and then we're able to powder coat over the top of it. We did not put the phosphate on the porcelain because the blasting itself created an etch, and if we would have phosphated it, the phosphate will actually burn into the porcelain, and when we would have coated it, we'd have seen it would have looked like water spots and water marks throughout it. So we had to blast it and then tack rag it off, blow it down real well and tack rag it off before we coated it, but we could not put the phosphate coating on the porcelain top just like we did on the metal. But porcelain is unique in the fact that it will withstand the temperature, and it will also ground. So we were able to powder coat over the top of the porcelain without having to take the porcelain all the way off. Porcelain's very hard to blast. It would have been a very, very hard process to take all of it off. And to be quite honest with you, there was so much damage to the top as it was. The porcelain actually adds a strengthening element to it, that it adds some thickness to it as well. If we'd have taken that all the way down to the metal, I think the metal was probably in such a poor shape that we would not have been able to salvage it at that point. So we were lucky in the fact that it was actually porcelain. We sanded that off, or sanded it down, I'm sorry, we sanded it down and smoothed it down, and then we're able to powder coat right over the top of it.